Welcome to the Audio Description Network Alliance. Today, we're very happy to have another very special bonus episode with Matt Lauterbach. Thanks so much for joining us, Matt. Matt is a filmmaker and editor and a media accessibility advocate. Thanks for coming.
Hey, thanks for having me. Really excited to chat.
What do you love about audio description?
I love its potential. I'm a documentary film editor. I come from the independent film world, and I've been aware of and advocating for audio description amongst my peers for a decade. And in the independent world, there's not much awareness, or at least there hasn't been until recently. And so it feels like when I introduce the idea to, let's say, film students who are interns and learning about this, it always, there's this sense of it being sort of unexplored territory for people. So people can go through 4-year film programs and never hear of this. And that's a problem. And so I feel like there's huge potential for the people being trained, making media, making films, making television, for them to not be aware of this tool to reach an entire audience is a problem. And I really get excited about sharing that potential with people who haven't learned about it yet.
What a great answer. And if we go back to what you said earlier about that potential, I'm curious when it comes to transitioning from potential to actual action, that you've had success in the last 10 years. What are some things that you've found, if you feel comfortable sharing, that works, whether it's with another independent film creator or if it's a student?
This workshop that I do with interns at Cartemquin Films, we sit down and we watch 5 minutes of a clip from a film called When Billy Broke His Head. It's the first 5 minutes of the film. And I tell them basically that we're going to watch the film without the picture. We're going to just, either swivel your chair away from the screen or close your eyes, or I might just turn the video off and we just listen to an audio file of those 5 minutes. And there's no audio description. It's just the sound. And I ask, what can you get from sound alone? Where are you confused? What story have you pieced together in your mind? What visuals are coming to mind? And what would you really like to know that the sound alone is not answering? And so again, any student of audio description has probably gone through this exercise. The next time we watch it, I play still just audio, but this time I add that audio descriptive layer. And we have another discussion about, what did the audio description answer? Were all your questions answered about what was happening? Are there still things that the audio description hasn't answered for you? And then the final time we watch it is with the sound, the visuals, and the description all together. And we look at almost a critical eye of, would you have written the description differently? And without fail, students who have never heard of this before go from being like, wow, what is this, to thinking creatively with it already, wondering if they can build this into their own process, wondering if they should edit with description in mind. And so they're already asking high-level questions about it. And that's super exciting to see their excitement, to see their eyes opened to this new art form, and for them to be really thinking about it creatively. So that's what I love.
When you talk about the high level, the creative application of audio description, what I'm hearing is the students as well as filmmakers are looking at audio description beyond just at the end of the film tagging it on. Can you name maybe some specific examples that you felt were really successful in that aspect of the creation of the film while keeping audio description in mind?
Yeah, so I think that filmmakers, they've been trained in the idea of show, don't tell. And that makes it kind of like they have to do a 180 when they think about audio description. It's like, wait, I'm telling what we're showing, I'm doing both. And so it is kind of a challenge to the actual writing of the description isn't necessarily something that filmmakers have the best instinct for, right? I think there's a school of thought, leave the audio description to the experts. But then I think there's another school of thought that could be, well, filmmakers know their film best. They have intention behind every shot, and they should have a chance to weigh in on that intention. And that's what I find working with filmmakers. That's a really important part of my process, is giving them that chance to really give feedback. I even sometimes have to help them through the educational curve of what audio description is, what it needs to do, and what it is not great to do with it. And so there's always a little bit of like guiding them, but really there's some great insights that can come from the filmmaker in terms of, you know, what mood they wanted to convey here, what the true emphasis of the shot that they selected was. There's some guidance that often needs to happen with a filmmaker who this is the first they've ever thought about this. And so they don't know much about the craft. They don't know much about the reasoning behind these decisions at the microscript level of the description script, but they have that artistic eye that they can bring and really inform the audio description writer if they're going down the wrong path.
That's great. One of the things that I'm hearing in your education is that when it comes to teaching filmmakers or students of film, that there is a nuance to the creation of film with audio description in mind. And I'm curious when it comes, we've explored nuance ad nauseum in this in this podcast. That's one of my favorite ideas, is to find, hey, this is subjective. It's not like one size fits all. This works for this. It might not work for this, and it might be good to break the rules here. Maybe this rule would be best applied a little more directly. That when it comes to that nuance, it sounds like you're very cognizant, you're very aware of what filmmakers need as well as what the audio description is. When it comes to that nuance, is there a way that the experts in audio description and filmmakers can collaborate? And I'm curious how that connection happens, the collaboration between the audio description experts and
Yeah,
filmmakers.
well, that's a great question. And I think that I'll shift it from nuance to more just of a how-to question that I think filmmakers have. Again, I consider myself a media accessibility advocate. And so a lot of the time, I'm not necessarily creating the script for the filmmakers. I'm just encouraging them to think about doing this at all. And so what filmmakers often encounter is they'll say, this sounds amazing, but then there's barriers that they encounter immediately. There's funding. They're like, oh, this is great. Are there any grants for this? How do I get the money to do this? They may be organizing a community screening, and there's no digital cinema package at this church or this library where they're screening their grassroots independent film. And they might be doing an outdoor film screening that they've brought the folding chairs themselves. And they want to do this. When they learn about it, they're excited about it, but they just don't know how. They're not aware of the tradition of live description in theater and how that can be kind of transferred to the cinematic setting. And you can have a live audio describer in the back of the audience narrating the film. You don't have to have the high-tech synced stream of audio that's sent separately to devices. But there's just a lot, I mentioned that education curve, that learning curve. There's just so much that independent filmmakers don't know yet. And so it's not so much about helping them figure out and appreciate the nuances of description. It's just getting them to that point of doing it for the first time. So yeah, that's kind of the level that I work at in my advocacy, is like, how do you do this? What is it? A, B, how?
Yes, very cool. And it's great to hear how the how is being accepted, and it's like, oh, I can imagine light bulbs are going off, that your filmmakers as well as the audience. Maybe we could pivot to talk about the audience's experience during these community screenings, or any audience member that may have seen a film that did have audio description. Can you talk about that result?
Yeah, I've been involved since 2015 in a local grassroots film festival called Real Abilities Festival Chicago. It is a satellite festival of a New York-based International Real Abilities Film Festival. But we basically did the grassroots community screening thing for 3 years where we invited audiences. And in terms of the audio description, I'll be honest, the first thing to figure out is the marketing, how to let people know that there will be description available, because the assumption is that there won't be any. This is a tiny grassroots film festival, and it's just so rare for there to be any audio description at cinema events that's the first thing, is getting audience, getting people who are blind or low vision and are interested in cinema to learn about your event, to come to it, to know with confidence that there will be description. And so we really find partnerships with organizations to be super important. So for Real Abilities Chicago, we have partnered with Access Living, which is a disability rights organization here in Chicago, with Hadley Institute for the blind and visually impaired. We try to find partners who have a built-in audience, and we let them know about our event and that fact that it will be audio described. But I would say that that's one thing that I would communicate to any film maker or film organizer, is it's not quite if you build it, they will come. If you offer audio description, you can get discouraged at first. Like, we offered audio description and then no one asks for the headsets. No one comes to the community screening. And you're like, oh, I went to all this effort and expense for what? Well, you got to build that audience. You got to do the outreach. And that's really step one.
This is such an exciting conversation. I don't think we've had this kind of conversation before when it comes to audio description, and I've got 2 million questions. What's one of your favorite answers to a question that people ask you when they dive into this audio description access, whether it's on the marketing side or overcoming barriers or just awareness in general?
Yeah, and I kind of suggested a potential answer to that, which is the question, are there any grants for this? So the kind of process of independent filmmakers, it's not like your project gets greenlit by a studio and the money's there and there's distribution that pays for the description and the captioning. It's more like, I get $5,000 at a time, do a shoot, put together a demo, use that demo to try to get more money, piece that money together from 5 to 50 sources, including Kickstarter campaigns and GoFundMe and all of these different ways where you're really scraping every last penny just to get the film made. And so it's not like these filmmakers hear about audio description and think, oh, cool, I'll just move some funds over from this. They hear about audio description, they know it's a good idea, they believe in it as part of equity, but they just don't have the money. And so that is really the first question that I always get is, oh, this sounds great. Yeah, are there any funds for filmmakers who want to make a description track? And right now, there's very few. And that creates a problem because filmmakers who want to do this have no way to do it financially unless it gets picked up for distribution by Netflix or Amazon, or these places that do it as part of the package. And so you have this entire life of an independent film during festivals and community screenings to make this thing that could widen your audience. And that's a big problem for festivals as well. Festivals, there's kind of a debate right now of like, whose responsibility is it to fund the description? Is it the independent filmmakers, the producer who scraped together every last penny for this, to scrape together another 3,000? Is it the festival's responsibility as sort of a part of the path towards distribution? And if you wait until getting picked up by Netflix, if it ever does, there's an entire year to 2 years of public screenings for that film that are not accessible. So yeah, that's the question that the people I consult with are desperately wanting an answer to. And right now, I can't give them the yes answer. It's the, well, not really answer.
And back to the original conversation of potential,
Mm-hmm.
where things can
Exactly.
be headed.
Yeah, and that really is how I see it. The potential is there, and the awareness is starting to get there. I mentioned that I've been advocating for 10 years in my field, and that's not felt like it's gotten any traction until literally 2020. Two things happened in 2020 that I really think got filmmakers thinking about this. And that was the pandemic, obviously, where suddenly remote access was a really cool thing that emerged out of a really horrible thing. And that remote access enabled participants who could not travel to be able to join film events that they were never able to join. And the ease with which captioning could be integrated into online events brought an even wider audience in. And so now filmmakers have already gone through a little of the learning curve for themselves by organizing Zoom events or eventive events, that kind of thing. But then a second thing happened where the film Crip Camp came out in 2020, generated a lot of buzz, was nominated for Best Documentary in the Academy Awards, and I think got a lot of attention in the doc community. And those two things, all of a sudden, film organizations are starting to wonder is this our responsibility? Should we create incentives for filmmakers? Should we make captions and description a requirement for festivals? And those questions haven't been answered yet, but the conversation is happening. And it's an exciting thing to see things shifting from, that sounds really cool, I don't have the money to do it, to that's essential, how do we make it happen?
What a great answer. Let's go back to one of my favorite questions. And I think you've really answered this already. I'm curious if you have any other things that you'd like to share when it comes to this. Where would you love audio description to go?
I would love to see audio description go into almost a more DIY space or open source space. Again, I'm an independent filmmaker. Everything's grassroots, everything's DIY. And there's some, again, that word potential for audio description to become DIY as well. One of the things that is a barrier for filmmakers who are aware and committed to access through audio description is if they want to self-distribute, there's no technological means right now to upload a video to Vimeo or Eventive or YouTube and have there be a secondary audio track that you can toggle on or off, just like captions. So if I've gone to the expense and taken on the funding myself and raised money to do audio description, there's no platform that I can use unless Netflix picks me up. There's no platform to stream my video where I can make just that, boom, press audio description and it switches to audio description. You have to upload 2 different links and there's already immediately segregation there. And those 2 different links, the audio description is never going to be the most publicized of those 2 links. And it's such a simple solution. I don't know why these self-distributing platforms like Vimeo and YouTube, I don't know why they're not making that available. And again, just like with everything access related, more than just people with disabilities could benefit from this. Filmmakers who want to add audio commentaries, a director's commentary track to their film could use that secondary audio track for that purpose. A dub track, there's all sorts of reasons that second track could come into use, but it's not being developed. So another kind of grassroots place I want to see audio description headed is, there's this wonderful tool, which I'm sure all of your listeners are aware of, called Spectrum Access. But for an independent filmmaker like myself, or someone I consult with, they may have their description track and they may want to make it available on Spectrum Access, but that's proprietary right now. And so I, as a filmmaker, can't make my film available on Spectrum Access with description, or really on any platform that can interface in a theater. That would be a huge solution for grassroots community screenings. If you could go to that theater that does not have a digital cinema package, take out your cell phone, whether it's Android or Apple, and sync up that description track with the audio that's coming through the theater speakers. That would be a huge help to independent filmmakers who want to do this, but who just can't make it happen because the technology isn't made available to them.
Is there anything else you'd like to share?
I think that there's some interesting space potentially for experimentation in audio description. I mentioned that filmmakers really get excited and already start thinking about creatively about description when they first learn about it. And it just makes me interested and excited to find out what filmmakers may come up with in terms of thinking outside the box when it comes to description. That's another interesting potential that I don't even have the words for yet myself, but I just see it when description becomes something that's not just a final thing at the end, handled by other people. When and if description can move into the creative realm that, color grading or the sound mix happens at, who knows what influence directors could bring, but it could go some pretty neat places.
Excellent. How can we reach you, either on social media, websites, otherwise?
Yeah, so I mentioned the consulting I do. I started an organization in 2020 called All Senses Go, and I started it with my co-directors of the Real Abilities Film Festival here in Chicago. Their names are Rebecca Torres and Grishma Shah. And the three of us do consulting with film organizations to try to help them through that learning curve. Organizations that have learned about this, want to start doing it, but just need some guiding help through those first steps. And so All Senses Go is the company name. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter. Just look up All Senses Go, and we also have a website, allsensesgo.com. You can probably guess the intent behind the name, but if you're a sci-fi buff, all systems go. It's the sense that everything's ready to go. Let's hit it. And I really want the captioning and description to be almost like part of the helicopter dashboard that you have to turn on in order to get your film running.
Great, man. Thanks so much for sharing, and thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure.